Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we try to figure out if these companies are actually doing well or just good at making them look good. Today we are looking at Nushares ETF Trust, and boy, do they have a report for us that tells us a lot about where your money might be going if you invest in their funds. Before we dive in, if you like getting straight answers and no fluff from financial documents, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I've been building a pretty cool community over on Discord where we break down more of these filings. The link is in the description, so go join. So what we have here is a report from the US Securities and Exchange Commission, or CC as most people call it. It is basically a look inside two of Nuveen ETFs, the Nuveen High Yield Municipal Income ETF, which they call NHIM for short, and the Nuveen Municipal Income ETF, or NUMI. This report is for the period ending the 30th of September 2025. Think of it as a financial checkup for these funds, showing us what they invested in and how they performed. Now, the most interesting part of these reports is always where the money is actually going. For the HIM fund, as of the 30th of September 2025, they had a total net asset value of over $86 million. That is a lot of money. They invested in a bunch of different things, but the biggest chunk, over 97%, was in municipal bonds. That is right, government, IOS. Let's take a peek at where some of that money was invested. For example, under the Alabama holdings for HIM, they had over $1.9 million invested in solid waste disposal revenue bonds and cooperative district energy supply revenue bonds. These sound pretty specialized, and they are essentially the fund is lending money to specific projects like a waste disposal facility or an energy supply project and expects to get it back with interest. Then we jump to California, where HIM had over $6 million invested. This included clean energy project revenue bonds, essential housing revenue bonds for places like Glendale Properties, and even bonds for the Loma Linda University Medical Center. It seems this fund is really focused on investing in projects that serve communities like housing or essential services. Moving on to Colorado, HIM had a whopping $11 million invested. This is a significant portion of their portfolio. They were invested in things like special revenue bonds for regional transportation authorities, general obligation bonds for school districts and metropolitan districts, and healthcare revenue bonds for organizations like Covenant Living Communities and Services. It shows a broad investment strategy within Colorado, touching on infrastructure, education, and healthcare. Florida also shows up with over $12 million invested by NHIM. This included investments in community development districts, which are areas set up to fund public improvements like roads and utilities. They also invested in revenue bonds for the Brightline Florida passenger rail expansion project, showing an interest in transportation infrastructure, plus they put money into hospital revenue bonds for places like Orlando Health Inc. Now, over to the NUMI fund, this one is even bigger, with over $64 million in net assets like NH. This fund also heavily invests in municipal bonds, about 99% of its portfolio. It is clear these ETFs are all about the municipal bond market. For NUMI in Alabama, they had nearly $1 million invested in gas project revenue bonds and sewer revenue warrants for Jefferson County. Again, very specific projects. California is a big one for NUMI too, with over $9 million invested. This includes clean energy project revenue bonds, hospital revenue bonds for Sutter Health and Providence St. Joseph Health, and even revenue bonds for the California State University system. It really paints a picture of where this fund is putting its money, supporting public services and higher education. Colorado holds over $3 million for NUMI. This includes general obligation bonds for school districts in Aurora and Denver, and revenue bonds for the Regional Transportation District. Florida represents over $3 million for NUMI, with investments in things like stormwater revenue bonds for Miami Beach and transit system sales surtax revenue bonds. What we're seeing here is a consistent strategy across both funds. They are buying bonds issued by states and municipalities to fund public projects. They are not investing in flashy tech stocks or trendy companies. Instead, they are acting like a bank for local governments and public service organizations. Let's look at the actual balance sheet for these funds. As of the 30th of September 2025, HIM had total assets of over $86 million. Their liabilities, which are what they owe, were quite small, only about $25,000. This is a good sign, meaning they don't have much debt. The difference, which is their net assets, is that $86 million we saw earlier for NUMI. Total assets were over $64 million and liabilities were about $605,000. A bit higher on liabilities for Numi, but still very manageable compared to their total assets. Now let's talk about performance over the 6 months ending the 30th of September 2025. HIM generated over $2.1 million in interest income. That is the money they make from lending out their money. After expenses, which were relatively low, they had a net investment income of nearly $2 million. However, they did have some realized and unrealized losses on their investments, totaling over $235,000. So overall, their net assets increased by about $1.7 million during this period. For Numi, they earned over $1.2 million in interest income. Their expenses were even lower than NHIM. Their net investment income was over $1.1 million. Interestingly, Numi had a much better performance in terms of unrealized gains on investments, bringing in over $757,000. This helped them make a positive net change in assets of over $1.7 million. Looking at the financial highlights for each share, NHIM's net asset value per S-share was $24.78 at the end of September 2025. So if you owned one share, it was worth almost $25 for Numi. Each share was worth $24.92. Both funds saw their net asset values slightly decrease from the beginning of the period, but that is pretty common with market fluctuations. Let's zoom in on some key ratios for NHIM. The actual expenses were 0.36% of their net assets. This is quite low, meaning most of the money invested is actually working for you. Not going to fees, Numi was even better with expenses at 0.30%. That is really good for actively managed ETFs. The net investment income ratio for NH was 4.81%, and for Numi it was 3.81%. This shows how much income these funds are generating relative to their size. Okay, so what is my take on all of this? These Nuveen ETFs, NH and Numi, are very focused. They are essentially municipal bond funds. This means they are generally considered lower risk compared to stock funds, but they also typically offer lower returns. They are like the steady paycheck of the investment world. The good news is that their expense ratios are very competitive, especially for the type of investments they hold. This means more of your investment dollar is working for you. The fact that they had positive net investment income and a positive change in net assets in this reporting period is also a good sign, even for NHIM, which saw some unrealized losses. The potential risks here are the usual ones for bond funds. If interest rates rise significantly, the value of their existing bonds could fall. Also, while municipal bonds are generally safer than corporate bonds, there is always a risk of a municipality defaulting on its debt, though this is relatively rare. Since these funds are investing in specific projects, understanding the health of those underlying projects is key for a deeper analysis, but that goes beyond what a quick review of a financial report can cover. These funds seem to be performing as expected for municipal bond ETFs. They are providing steady income and are managed efficiently. If you are looking for a conservative way to invest and want to benefit from tax-exempt income, these could be worth looking into, but always do your own research. Alright. That is our breakdown of Nuveen's latest report. What is your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments if this analysis was valuable. Hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.